Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. This is a very great day. Actually, it was not today. The day this judgment was delivered, Mr. Speaker, was a great day for Senate, for devolution, and for this country. Mr. Speaker, first I want to thank you, petitioner number 2, Mr. Speaker, for accepting to be a petitioner in this case and for providing leadership. Mr. Speaker, it wasn't easy. The day you signed these documents, a day before, and the very day that we went to file these documents, we walked together from here up to the High Court, Mr. Speaker, Milimani. And Mr. Speaker, that show of solidarity, you became the second speaker who led this house to get the right decision from the courts. And Mr. Speaker, the first speaker, Speaker Uhuru, led us to the Supreme Court. You led us to the High Court, Mr. Speaker, for proper implementation of that decision that we had received from the Supreme Court. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to have been part of the petitioners, Mr. Speaker, as a petitioner number 3. And I want to confess to senators in this house that it was not an easy decision. And being the majority leader then, Mr. Speaker, it was putting me in direct collision path with the president and the party leader of Jubilee. And Mr. Speaker, you remember an incident that occurred in State House before we filed this case, having written a letter to the president that he needs to intervene before we go to court, that it was not very friendly. But Mr. Speaker, I knew for sure that it will only take leadership, Mr. Speaker, for people to stand firm, for us to maintain and protect this house. And that's why I want to congratulate the minority leader, who also became, Mr. Speaker, our counsel, Mr. Speaker, in this case, Senior Counsel Omogeni, and my senior, and my brother Mutula Kilonzo Jr., for taking up the responsibility to represent, Mr. Speaker, the Senate for free. And for, Mr. Speaker, the Secretariat led by the clerk, and Mr. Speaker, the head of the legal, and Mr. Speaker, Mercy, who did a fantastic job. And also a number of us in the lawyers who are here, I know the Senator Migori, Professor Kindiki, Pareno, myself, and others gave our comments, including, Mr. Speaker, the soon to be admitted Cherargei, Mr. Speaker, was the chair of legal then, who, Mr. Speaker, was part and parcel of those who contributed, Mr. Speaker, to this process, Senator of Mombasa, Senator Faki, all the lawyers in this house, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I want also to remind the Parliament that now properly Parliament is now going to be called Parliament. If we follow the procedure that the courts have said, now laws of Kenya will be laws made by the Parliament of Kenya, not one house, Mr. Speaker. And this is the point we have reiterated over and over again, that you cannot have one house taking over responsibility of making laws on behalf of the rest of the Parliament. Mr. Speaker, can you even imagine that a law that governs, Mr. Speaker, the administration of this house, like the one of Parliamentary Service Commission, that was hurriedly passed in National Assembly, Mr. Speaker, with a lot of mutilation of the responsibilities of the clerk of this house, Mr. Speaker, and the clerk of the Parliamentary Service Commission, among other responsibilities, because people feared that if you bring, Mr. Speaker, the law to this house will scrutinize that law, Mr. Speaker, and it will never pass the test. Now we have the opportunity to scrutinize all those laws, Mr. Speaker, within the 9 months that are given by the courts, and failure to do so, Mr. Speaker, of course, definitely all those laws will fall by the sides. Mr. Speaker, I also want to emphasize here that this is not the last case. One, we have, Mr. Speaker, I fear for you, because now the powers that have been recognized of the Speaker and the responsibility you have, Mr. Speaker, with your brother in National Assembly in determining whether a bill concerns county, now puts a lot of spotlight on you. Mr. Speaker, you have to stand firm, because now history, Mr. Speaker, will judge you whether you will stand firm or you will waver. Because, Mr. Speaker, some people will quietly come to you. They will come to you at night and tell you, Mr. Speaker, can you accede to the following laws that they don't concern counties? Then, Mr. Speaker, we'll be left here, Mr. Speaker, with a fantastic judgment, but then without a defender, Mr. Speaker, of that very judgment. So that judgment is a sword by itself. It cuts both ways. Mr. Speaker, it gives powers to this house, but gives you also responsibility to become vigilant, because a lot of people will come before you to twist you, Mr. Speaker, to make decisions that are not going to be favorable to this House. And because of that, I need to suggest something that the Legal Affairs Committee, Senator Mogeni and team will have to look at. Mr. Speaker, we need to amend our standing orders to now give in detail, Mr. Speaker, the procedure of the operationalization of Article 110, which will include, Mr. Speaker, a communication from the Speaker on what decision he will have taken on Article 110, so that then it's not just going to be the Speaker making that decision on bills, but also that decision be communicated to the House. Mr. Speaker, in a situation where there's need to be a mediation or as to whether law concerns count and should have been allowed to come to this House or not, then, Mr. Speaker, we should also put in our standing orders the procedure, including formation of our mediation team prior to the operationalization of that law. The last thing I want to say, Mr. Speaker, is that we've achieved a lot, but there is a threat that is going to affect this House. This BBI, Mr. Speaker. This BBI is going to, Mr. Speaker, take away the gains we have achieved in that judgment. And particularly, Mr. Speaker, when it comes to the touching of Article 123 in terms of decision of this House, where, Mr. Speaker, the people of Kenya already decided that decisions of this House, Mr. Speaker, must be passed by at least a half of the counties, not just the individuals sitting in this House, of the counties. And, Mr. Speaker, we must be vigilant. I saw in the media Senator Orengo and members of the Law House saying this document cannot be opened, it must go as it is. I hope, Mr. Speaker, it was a misrepresentation of facts. This document, Mr. Speaker, must be opened, must be discussed. We must, Mr. Speaker, change those sections. How can you tell me, Mr. Speaker, that Article 218 that talks about division of revenue, Mr. Speaker, shall be vetoed by the National Assembly? And at the same time tell us that 35% of the money will go to counties. Mr. Speaker, the president, if you get a president who is Mjeuri, Mr. Speaker, the president will say, I can't be able to allocate 35%, and Mr. Speaker, there is nothing we can do because it will collude with National Assembly, and they pass, Mr. Speaker, whatever, if it is 20, 15, or 18%, Mr. Speaker, and there is nothing we can do. The courts have already recognized that, Mr. Speaker, appropriation will not take place at the national government level until, Mr. Speaker, we agree on division of revenue. That is why those people have run to the BBI report to remove our responsibility on division of revenue. Mr. Speaker, that report ought to be opened. And I want to challenge this House. Mr. Speaker, and particularly, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, it's a pity that, Mr. Speaker, BBI was led by a chairman who is the chair of security in this House. And, Mr. Speaker, the former Attorney General was sitting there, Mr. Speaker, who is a very respectable person. Then, Mr. Speaker, the institution that has been assaulted most is the Senate. Mr. Speaker, as a House, you must lead us to a proper retreat. And I want to thank Senator Mogeni, because I have information that in a forum, Mr. Speaker, in Naivasha, he stood firm with some of the senators there and said, things must change in this BBI report concerning the Senate. And I want to say, it will take the courage of senators in this House to stand firm and say, we want a Senate that stands for the interests of the people of Kenya. Mr. Speaker, I will hate the day I will come back to this House to be called the male senator of Elgeyo Marakwet. I will hate the day, Mr. Speaker, I'll come to this House and call Orengo, Mr. Orengo, the male senator of Siaya. Mr. Speaker, or call Amos Wako, the male senator of Siaya. What kind of a thing is that? If, Mr. Speaker, we are tired of making Senate a proper Senate, with, Mr. Speaker, the proper representation and one vote for every count, and we want to donate this House for purpose of gender parity, Mr. Speaker, it's better to change that section and say the Senate shall be composed of women only, so that at least every county can elect one senator who is a lady. But to come and call Senator Fatuma here that the female senator of Isiolo, Mr. Speaker, I think we have a problem. We need, Mr. Speaker, to ensure that the institution of the Senate is protected, and we must achieve the gender rule that we must achieve, but not by, Mr. Speaker, losing the gains that we have achieved for the last 7 years or 8 or so, Mr. Speaker, protecting the interest of the counties and the county government. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much, and Mr. Speaker, please stand firm like that. Even the way you are reading the communication today, that kind of confidence is what we want. And Mr. Speaker, because these decisions for the remaining 1.5 years will be on your shoulders, Mr. Speaker, we will stand before you, we will support you like we did in this case. And Mr. Speaker, I pray that you will stand firm. And Mr. Speaker, I beg to support.
Senator George